We are back. Giants baseball, past, present, and future. The host is Timmy Haller. How are you, sir?
Good, Ralph. I'm doing good. How's everything going with you?
Pretty well. I'm in Northern California. You're in Southern California. So the irony goes on, you being the Giant fan and me being the warm weather fan. The weather...
I'm jealous, though. I am jealous of you guys living up there in that beautiful Bay Area. I really am.
It is that, and it's just like two different worlds, Northern and Southern California. Bay Area is, weather-wise, it's different, and culture-wise, it's different, but... And you miss it. You get up here from time to time. You're coming up here at the end of June, you mentioned.
Yes, we're going. We're having a 35th high school reunion, and we're going to do the event in Triples Alley at AT&T Park prior to a Philadelphia Philly game. The Giants will be playing the Phillies, and it'll just be a great time to see some old friends and. Taking a ball game. So many of us are big, huge Giant fans, and I'm really just looking forward to seeing all my old friends from high school.
Nice. What? How many years is this? How many years reunion?
This will be 35 years, our 35th reunion, and we didn't have a big graduating class. Only about 280, I think 283 was the graduating class, which isn't very big for a school on the peninsula, a public school on the peninsula, but and then we've lost quite a few classmates over the last probably 5 or 10 years to different various things, whether it was disease or suicide or accidents, anything, and we've lost a few classmates. We've lost a couple here already early this year, so. We're all kind of having that conversation. When will be the last time we can actually get together and do this? Because things in our lives, everybody's lives, things turn and change. Whether you're physically, moving geographically, or there's somebody passes away. So we're all really looking forward to sharing some good times together.
Now, what high school is this?
San Mateo High School.
San Mateo High School, and that's in Northern California. So if you're out there in listener land, you can get in touch with Timmy on Facebook, and I know there are some tickets still available, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. So anybody that has any desire, you don't even have to be in our class. It's anybody that loves the game and obviously has my acquaintance or the acquaintance of others that are going to be there. You're more than welcome to come. It would be our honor to have you at our function.
Wow, that's terrific. So many people through Facebook and the internet and social media, if it's not Facebook, it's Twitter, it's given we seniors, or you're not a senior yet, but getting up there a little bit, a chance to get in touch with people you would have no way of doing that 20 years ago. You could no way of finding them, no way of having any idea. Now there are reunion sites. I myself am going to a reunion in Jackson Heights, New York, at the end of or in the middle of September 10th, at
wow.
the park we used to play at, and I think it's a schoolyard. They think they call it the 90th Street Park. We called it the schoolyard when I was growing up. So we have all kinds of ages of folks that go back to these reunions that, you could be gone from the neighborhood 20 years or 50 years like myself. So it's kind of cool, and so I know what you're going through, and I'm happy for you. We mentioned the mortality, which seems to be the theme of the older you get, the more it comes into your life. Relatives, friends, acquaintances. And in this case, we lost recently, in the last few weeks, a member of the Giant family. And Jim Ray Hart, number 16. And you knew him personally. I was awed by the man. He had incredible power. He only had a short career. I think he had a shoulder injury, if I'm not mistaken, that curtailed him, and he had some other demons that, if I'm not mistaken, that came into play when he was still playing. I remember Willie Mays would talk to Jim Ray Hart about curtailing his off-field activities. And but that said, everything I know about the man, very well loved. Tell me about Jim Ray Hart to me.
You know, and it's been a long time since I really had any interaction with him, but you know, Jim Ray Hart was just an open-hearted, very naive Southern fellow, Southern gentleman, if you will. He was not privy to great education. He wasn't privy to a lot of our cultural benefits that we have today. But the guy was an incredible beast playing baseball. Like you said, he was so strong. Right. He had a speech impediment, so it was really hard for him to be understood by a lot of his fellow teammates. But he was so well loved because of his childlike, tendencies and his absolute love to play baseball. And again, and to just reiterate, he did have some demons. Jim Ray liked to drink bourbon and whiskey to extreme excess. As a matter of fact, his nickname was Old Crow, just because of the fact that he loved to consume that in large quantities. So that certainly, I believe, in my own opinion, sort of cut short his career, and he could have been a brilliant Hall of Fame third baseman, absolutely, without a doubt. There's a story that I'd like to share. What's that, Ralph?
Please.
Yeah, there's a story that I want to share that not a lot of people know about this. This is something that my father, and I think it's okay to do this. Unfortunately, that all the players in this cast of fellows are no longer with us, starting with Herman Franks, Jim Davenport, my dad, Tom Howler, and the star of the show, Jim Ray Hart. And they were down in Casa Grande in 1966, or 67, excuse me, because it was the year after his Rookie of the Year performance in 67. And the Giants worked out early in spring training before going to play their games up in Phoenix in a little town called Casa Grande, Arizona.
Right. Horace Stoneham bought the town, if I'm not mistaken, when the Giants
put a hotel there and put a very nice, at the time, a very nice minor league and early major league training camp in Casa Grande. And the guys were there. They all reported. It was a couple of days into camp already, and there was nowhere sign nor communication of Jim Ray Hart. And Herman Franks went to my dad and Jim Davenport, and he said, take these car keys and drive my car down to Mississippi. And that's where Jim Ray lived. And he had the address, and the two set out one late afternoon, early evening from Casa Grande, Arizona, and drove all night and then to the next day. And I don't know exactly how long it took, but it took many hours to drive to Jim Ray Hart's hometown, and then he lived a little bit out on the outskirts of this town. And
this is like about 2.5, 3 days worth of driving from
Arizona. And they drive 8-10 hours and switch, and the other guy would sleep, and the other guy would drive. And they got into this little town, this little podunk little town without a stoplight or anything. they stopped at the little general store there, and they asked, where does Jimmy Ray Hart live? And the fellow there said, oh, you turn left at the tree, and you turn right at the crow's nest, whatever.
Yeah, right.
And you'll find there's a little shanty right off the road there, and that's where Jim Ray Hart lives and his family. Well, they got over there, and it was mid-morning, 10, 11 o'clock, late morning. And they pulled up, and Jim Ray Hart is sitting on, and this is something you would actually think it was scripted, a movie or something. But Jim Ray Hart is in his overalls that had been cut off at the knees, so he had they were shorted, cut off, no shirt on. One of the straps is not buckled or wrapped around his shoulder, and he's sitting on an old rocking chair with a pint of Old Crow on the front porch, rocking back and forth. And my dad and Jabby drove up, and he just sat there, and he kind of looked and then peered down, and here Dad and Jabby get out of the car, and they walk up and they say, Jimmy Ray, how are you, buddy? And they said, hey, you know what? It's time to go to spring training.
Get your gloves.
So we need to pack your bags and get your gloves. We got everything else we need, but bring some clothes. And if you have your glove with you, bring it. And in 20 minutes, they were back on the road. And that's a story that a lot of people don't know. And then they returned back to Grand, and it was like nothing ever happened. They never missed a beat.
It says a lot about Daffy, too, because he just lost his job to Jim Ray Hart.
Well, and I know, and that's exactly, Jim Davenport, he just loved everyone and everything. There was rarely was there ever anything negative that came out of his mouth. But when it came to a teammate and a brother who he played baseball with, it doesn't matter what was going on. Even if he was taking his position, of which he did for a couple of years before he was dealt to the Yankees.
Yep.
And, I just think that story in itself sort of epitomizes the whole Giants organization.
It is a family that you couldn't do that with in a corporate institution like today, for instance. That couldn't be done. There's too much coverage. There's too much media coverage.
Blown up. Exactly. It would just be blown up and blown out of proportion. And the one thing that I love about us, we talk about age and getting older. Hopefully that age translates into wisdom, and the wisdom being the humanity and how important and precious human life is and the people in our life. It's not about how much dough do I have, how big is my house, how many cars do I have, what kind of trophy chick do I have on my arm today. It's about the true human love that people have. And, I'll get on my soapbox here a minute. Those are qualities of mankind that 40, 50 years ago, those were just regular, everyday kind of things. That was the behavior of our people. Today, people just turn and walk the other way. I mean, they have just they're so out of touch with the passion for human life, and they're so self-absorbed and so selfish that something like that now that, we'd probably send the traveling secretary down there to go get them. They'd find them. ESPN would be down there with cameras, and then try to hustle them on an airplane back to Phoenix, and it just tells you that at a time long ago that people actually loved each other and cared about what was going on in their life.
Yeah, well, that still happens today. It really does. Just have to look for people like Tim Halla, for instance, who, I mean, you just exude that in everything you do. And I want to thank you for keeping the Giant family together because, you know, at this point, the bulk of it is gone. Lonnie is gone. Willie Mack is very, very ill. I mean, he's just
very
tenuous. Willie Mays is simply old. I mean, that if nothing else, age gets you. And there are very few people like yourself that were there, were in the clubhouse, were on the field. You were a ball boy. You were a bat boy. You know, you got to see a side of it, and stories like this that you can help carry on. And I'm grateful from a personal standpoint. If we weren't doing a radio show, just talking to you like this on the phone, just our conversations, part of the highlight of my life. You know,
well, I'm having a lot of fun doing this, you know, and I'm thinking now as I've ventured on in this thing that we're doing, it's getting me more aware again. It's reminding me of the times of yore, you know. I mean, and how really important and precious those things were, and now that we're losing some of these great people, these great guys that played for the Giants,
right.
We're all really remembering and not taking for granted how special the Giants organization is in that regard. And it's unfortunate that death will bring these things together, but it helps us to remember and reminds us of how blessed we really are to have the family that we have.
Right, and it transcends. It doesn't have to be the Giant family for folks. Your own extended family, and it doesn't even have to be blood. You can make family out of your acquaintances. All of a sudden, they're friends, and all of a sudden, they're bosom buddies. You can build a family around you. You can have folks, but you got to come from the idea that you're giving, not taking, and that you get by giving, and that's hard for people in a communal situation.
It is that altruistic sort of philosophy and approach to life. It's there, it's underlying, but it's not as shiny as it was maybe 30, 40 years ago. It is to a certain degree, but I don't know. I just grew up at a time where it just seemed to be the norm.
Yeah, but when you see it in today's day and age, because it is a rarity, it really is a pleasure. I'm scanning Facebook an hour or so before, and these two guys are on. They're obviously, if I'm getting their feed, they're obviously my friend or an extended friends of this, both in baseball caps, and they run a gardening service somewhere. I don't even know where. I didn't recognize their names, but they're telling the story about a woman who her next-door neighbor was charging her, a very elderly woman, her next-door neighbor was charging her to cut her weeds and hounding her for the money, and these two kids come along as starting a business, a landscape business, and they give her for the rest of her life. They say, you'll never have to pay another thing. We're going to come by every week, and we're going to make sure everything is done. And they didn't this is just a beautiful story that the people and it got me because they were wearing baseball caps. One was a Yankee hat, and one was a Brave cap, an Atlanta Brave cap, which was kind of funny to me too, because you talk the Yankees and the Southerners and all this. I don't think there's that much of a divide anymore. There's it used to be regional. I think all these people voting for Trump, it's north, south. This stupidity goes, it isn't just a southern northern thing anymore. But we have come together in that way. The internet and television and cable and all, it has made us all, from wherever we come from, we get the benefit of the culture of America if we want.
We
We'll
do.
take advantage of it.
We do, and I think even to you extend it worldly, globally too. Not just to the American people, but to everyone around the world now that has access to all this incredible technology, and and we have to learn. Mankind has to learn as we progress. It's all one big country now. It's all one big world. It's not the U.S. versus, Russia. It's all of us together. And until we actually get that, because we really do have some great privileges. And if we learn that we have enough that we can share, there's enough for everybody.
Right.
I don't think in my lifetime that's going to ever come about, but I certainly
sometimes I'm very pessimistic because this week there was all kinds of talk where people were worried that Obama might be apologizing for Hiroshima. God forbid that something like that could happen. It's rhetoric. What would hurt to just bring everybody together and say, we made mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes.
And you know what? There's nothing wrong with telling your brother, hey, I was wrong. I not just I'm sorry, but I was wrong. That was wrong of us or me. And that's the olive branch. But there's this insanity that, we have to have domination, and we have to oppress.
And people can't admit, people and politicians and world leaders and whoever it is, you can't admit, you have to back up everything you do. If you tell a lie, you got to tell another lie to cover it up. If you make a mistake, you can't say you made a mistake. Well, with the judgment that I had, with the input that I had, no, you made a mistake. Whatever it was. And if you say that, and you say you were wrong, like you say, then you humanize yourself, and other people can say, yeah, you were wrong here, but I was wrong here. So now we can start from making it right, rather than, well, if you're the only one that was wrong, then if you're afraid to say that I was wrong because the other person's not going to say they're wrong, that's not the idea. The idea is to really genuinely say it,
and mean it. And then, we have a microcosm though, and it's the beginning, I think, of some good healing for all of us, mankind in general. But in the United States, I think that we are a very forgiving group of people, at least within our own boundaries, within our own borders. And let's just gear this back to baseball. How many guys have lied about using PEDs and then finally came out and said, okay, I did use them. And then some time passes and they're forgiven. They're forgiven.
Right.
So I know we have it within our hearts and within our souls to say, let us learn from these errors or these poor judgment or the poor choices and decisions we've made and grow from it. And not maintain, this animosity.
Pryor, when he got up again in Congress and he said, we're not here to talk about that and all that thing, it would have been much better if he just said, we did it. First of all, it wasn't illegal when he was doing it. When that bottle of Android was on, or whatever it was on in his locker, it wasn't illegal at that time. And you know what? That's the way the playing field was. And people were doing it to keep up. They weren't just doing it to get muscle mass. They were doing it to recover from injury. And to help rehab. And, if you're the 25th man, if you're Marvin Bernard, for instance, and the 26th man may be just as good as you, you're going to do it to get the edge, and there was the culture of the time. And I got news for you, it's still the culture. Kids are getting busted in the minor leagues all the time at this point, and it isn't over, and is my chemist better than the detector? You know, you go back and forth, can I get a mask for this and that, and the big money buys the drugs too.
It does.
Designer drugs, you know. So these guys that are making $15 million a year could afford to give big bucks to these guys, and that perpetuates it.
It does.
But I'm convinced that each era should be judged on its own, and if you shouldn't be keeping Barry Bonds out of the Hall of Fame, you shouldn't be keeping Clemens out of the Hall of Fame. You should just realize that every era has its own way. I mean, there was before Jackie Robinson, you could say that Joe DiMaggio was playing a great deal of his career in an all-white environment, and that would have he been as great if he were playing with blacks in the game, and all of that.
Exactly. Or if Babe Ruth were playing today, and his behavior, his social prowess, would have gotten him into all sorts of heat, you know, with especially the media and the way he womanized and the way he carried on.
You know, interesting. I had a guest on one of my shows a week or so, and I must apologize. I can't think of his name right now. And he did a book. He wrote a book about the length of Babe Ruth's home runs, and he just followed it very closely. But he studied this man's life incredibly, and a lot of his womanizing, a lot of his boozing was ended in 1924, 1925, and for the rest of his career, a lot of the stories were fables. He wasn't quite as some of the stories were myth. And he also said that Babe Ruth was marvelous with children. And the way I judge a human being, do dogs and kids like you? You can fool adults, but you can't fool dogs and kids. And Babe Ruth was unbelievably great, more so than there's a story going to visit a kid in the hospital, that and the other thing. No, more so. He took because he was an orphan himself, and he just took pride in just dealing with kids and being around them and being an inspiration. So, but I interrupted you. I'm sorry. Are you still with me, Timmy? Oh fuck! I think
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh,
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. I was just going to piggyback on what you were saying regarding the Babe. You know, he had this incredible energy with the young kids, and he loved them just because he could relate with them so well, because of that upbringing. You know, and he touched so many young people, and they loved being around him, because I really think that George Herman was really a child at heart, and he was in personality. And I think a lot of it had to do with because he grew up or he spent some of his formative years in an orphanage.
Right.
And he had this incredible compassion and empathy for young children, for kids.
And also, you might be interested in this. He swung a 54-ounce bat.
Yep.
And with the idea back in those days, and that if you hit a ball with a 54-ounce bat, equally as hard, it's going to go further than with a 32-ounce bat, for instance.
Absolutely.
True, but there's a graph, and this fellow who was on, and I really feel, I'm away from the computer, I really feel terrible that my mind goes like this occasionally. He was talking about the idea that there was a time when Babe Ruth picked up he was mad or something, and he picked up a 32-ounce bat, and he creamed the ball. So it's the weight of the bat reduces that, obviously the heavier it is, the speed of your swing. So there's a graph that says that he would have been better served all of his career to use a lighter bat. And
he probably would have, but let me just...
He did quite well.
He did. Let me just kind of gloss over that. You know, it isn't the arrow. It's the Indian that shoots the arrow. It doesn't matter what you put in his hands. He would have crushed it.
And the heaviness of a 54-ounce bat, and he was an immense guy. He was incredibly strong. But anyway, yes, it's not the tools. It's that you're using. It's, for instance, the glove and the modernization of gloves. Gloves have changed since in your era, I'm sure. What has changed about the equipment that you, since you started playing as a little kid until now?
Oh, good grief! I mean, you know, when I was young in high school, I guess that's about the time when they started to do the batting gloves that actually had the Velcro and you would wrap it around your wrist.
Right.
Prior to that, they wore golf gloves, if they wore gloves at all.
Right.
I know Willie Mays did for a little while. I know Dick Allen did for a bit. But they used a very thin leathered golf glove. And then over the last 35 or 40 years, the technology and the ability to manufacture and the way they can actually produce the leather to that type of consistency or thinness or whatever, it's just phenomenal. And then, of course, over the last 10 or 12 years, we see the armor and all of the different things that the guys use when they're going up to the plate to protect different body parts.
Right.
So, yeah, and then the gloves themselves. I mean, excuse me. Yeah, right. You're right. I mean, they put these things down at their legs and everything else to ward off any bad contusions or bruises, etc. Guys are breaking their leg today. I wonder how many years ago guys would foul a ball off their leg, broke their leg, got back in the box and hit one in the gap and ran in for a double. Because the whole culture's changed. My dad used a glove that just had that little hole or a pocket in a catcher's glove. It was just a little area for where the ball could actually go into the leather glove. They used two hands. Catchers used two hands.
The flex mitt, which was it Bench that invented that modernized that?
I think that he was one of the first catchers to use that. I think somebody else probably designed it, but it designed it to his specifications or whatever. But even then, how we look back and we look at a Johnny Bench glove, it's archaic. It's like, what the heck is this? Yeah, how do you do, that kind of thing? These kids today, the game is easier to them in terms of equipment. Even when I was playing sandlot ball, we'd leave our glove out in the infield or in the outfield and come in and go hit, and the other kid would use the same glove. I mean,
they used to do that in the major leagues. They until the mid-50s, they would literally, I can remember Richie Ashburn leaving his glove out in center field in the Polo Grounds when he came in, and I went, whoa, that. What happens if the batted ball hits a glove? I don't remember if there were ground rules for that or not, but yeah, things are changing. Let's talk about the Giants, the current 16 edition. Since we discussed this a couple of weeks ago about Matt Cain, I remember saying to you how disappointed I was in the Giants fans for booing him at a period of time which looked to be the end of his career. Well, until this recent hamstring pull in the last day or so, Matt Cain had been pitching some good ball, and he's solidified that rotation. They're 30 and 20, something like that. Do you think they're playing over their head? What do you see that's good, and what are you concerned about right now?
Well, I think about 51 games now into this season is a pretty good indicator what the Giants are going to be. You know, I really think they're that good of a club. I think that there's top 3 starting pitchers. That is the foundation of the club. They're not an overwhelming offensive club, but they're an opportunistic team. They know how to move guys over, and they know how to score guys that are in scoring position. They can get runs in when they're in scoring position. They take those opportunities. They don't waste them. They get the guys. If they have 3 or 4 guys in scoring position in a game, they're going to drive in 2 or 3 of those runs. And the pitching's going to be dominant enough to hold their opponent to a couple runs and win. The Giants have there's a method to the way they play baseball, as opposed to other clubs. And I think the one thing outside of the fact of the guys that they put out on the field, it's the attitude, it's the aura that Bruce Bochy brings, and that the whole team concept, if you will. I mean, if you were to look at their lineup and look at their players, there isn't a single overwhelming superstar outside of their top 3 starting pitchers. But you have 8 position players that are very capable. I mean, Posey would probably be the one that's got the most notoriety, but when you put him collectively in with Belt and Pence and Crawford, Panic, and Duffy, I mean, they're all hitting about 250 to 270. They all have, low run.
Spawn.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a beautifully solid team. And I've said this before, you got Pence's engine that has to be a motivator. This guy is constant motion. He is a hustler. And you got four guys in the infield that are relatively young. It's taken Belt a while. Belt could take that next step and be a superstar. Belt really is now a good, solid, reliable player who doesn't streak as much as he did. He's much more consistent, and that's got to help. And Tomlinson's a good utility guy, so they look solid. They look very solid to me.
Yeah, and I like even these short little spins with guys that are coming up from AAA, like Parker. He's a sharp-looking kid. So when there's somebody like Pagan goes down with a 15-day DL kind of assignment, he's going to nurse his hamstring a little bit before it becomes a real issue. They call a kid up like Parker, who is more than adequate. I mean, I saw him make a throw today. They were in Denver. He came over down the left field line to catch a wind blown. The wind was blowing like it was a candlestick today at Coors Field, and he kind of, did a dance step or two along that left field line. There was a guy on third base with the Rockies, and he came perfect positioning, perfect footwork, and he came up throwing a cannon to Duffy, the cutoff guy, and the guy did not even think about scoring, leaving third base. To have a guy like that just sitting in the wings waiting for his everyday opportunity, what a luxury it is for the Giants to have people like that are in the wings, and they're all homegrown guys.
Guys who are playing now, because those guys feel the footsteps all the way, no matter where you are, you've always got somebody coming up behind you, and it's a motivator. Competition.
Well, it is. Here's kind of here's something that throws something interesting into the whole mix. This is Angel Pagan's last year of contract. So, I would guess, and I'm just speculating, that he wants to do as well as he can because he wants to come back and play for the Giants. He does. I don't think he would ever have the same type of success that he's had in his career that he's had with the Giants. I really don't see that happening. And in his age 36 or 37 year, he wants to prove to them that he's still worthy for another 2 or 3 years in a Giant lineup and to be a part of a potential world championship club.
Or prove to somebody, it may not even be the Giants ultimately, but if this is his walk year, and if he can get a big contract, one more big contract, that would be tremendous. And he's been great. He's been right there.
He served them more than adequately. He's been a really good player for the Giants. Absolutely.
And
he's a
if
favorite
anyone out there, don't lose sight of the fact, 3 out of 6 years. I mean,
exactly
6 years.
And they're playing in a fashion this year that potentially they could get it again. They really are right now kind of hitting that little groove. If they win 2 out of 3 and 3 out of 4 games, I really think that the Giants will be in the World Series again if they can stay healthy. And even with the Cain and Peavy at the tail end of their rotation, their bullpen is good. Strickland concerns me a lot because he throws flat, light stuff. He throws very hard, but it's very straight. And he gives up a lot of extra base hits, home runs, etc. And he's probably still learning how to really pitch at that level. But the Giants are so solid. What a great bullpen they have. Great starting pitching. They're extremely strong up the middle with Posey, Crawford, Panic, and Span out in the center. The Giants have a nucleus in the club, including the staff of management and the manager and his coaching staff. These guys are, incredible. And they showed that the other day. They beat the Cubs, who are getting all the hype this year. They beat them 2 out of 3. So.
And I don't want you to gloss over the fact that you said they're strong up the middle with those guys. Being strong up the middle is probably a prerequisite for doing well. Always has been. You can't look at too many championship teams that weren't strong up the middle. That's a biggie. And Duffy and Belt are no slouches either defensively in that infield. I think it's as good a defensive infield as they've had for a long, long time. And that's saying something, too, because, like I say, you're going through a streak of 5-6 years of this kind of ball. It's blessed. Think back how many years it took them to win that first championship from when they moved out here, not just from when they moved out, since 1954. And I'm starting to look at the Giants as one big franchise, the New York Giants and the San Francisco Giants. And we'll do a little bit of looking back on this show at the Giants when they played in New York. And I have a lot of questions of you about those early Giant teams that Davy and your dad were a part of. Those guys were minor leaguers when the team was in New York. And I wonder, I'll ask you this right now. Was your dad disappointed at all that he didn't get to play for the New York Giants?
No, he wasn't, because actually when he actually signed, they were the San Francisco Giants. So, my dad's thing was, I just want to play. And obviously the Giants came along it was before the draft, and they offered him a lot of money. I think it was $55,000 to sign. He was a bonus baby. Oh. That was a lot of dough back in those days. So, I think that he was just grateful to have an opportunity to go to play a sport that he absolutely loved. Let me throw something else into the mix here. He went to the University of Illinois as a quarterback. He went on a football scholarship. And when he was playing for the Illini, the Fighting Illini, he was, pretty good football player as well. And the New York Jets and the Los Angeles Rams both gave him offers to play professional football. And he declined. He declined because he felt that the opportunity playing baseball was greater and better for him and his family. And so he chose to play baseball. His real passion was basketball. He loved to play basketball. And he was a pretty good basketball player, too. He's the last collegiate at the University of Illinois to letter 9 times in his first 3 years of all 3 sports. And that was a rarity back in those days to have a freshman playing varsity football and varsity basketball. And so, that's kind of a neat little tidbit of trivia. But
yeah, and I probably have mentioned this 10 times now, but I'll mention it every week if necessary. Your dad was the first person I ever heard of that gave back scholarship money to the university after he signed and got a bonus from the Giants. I don't know if it was then that he gave it back or if it was a few years later. That made an incredible impression on me as a kid. Not that young a kid. But that's magnanimous, and that gives you an idea of Tom Halla.
Yeah. That's one thing about my dad. He was incredibly fortunate and blessed to have been able to do the things that he loved, but he was just really a giver. He loved everyone and everything, and he really did his best to try to do what he felt was right for the community in general. And in that particular case, he felt that the University of Illinois was due that money back because he came from a very humble and meager background, meek background, and he had the opportunity to go ahead and give back the money that it cost to educate him and allow him to play sports. And then over the years, he would contribute money to the alumni fund too. So it far surpassed the amount of money that he actually repaid in his scholarship, but he continued to give, very generously to the University of Illinois throughout his life. Nice.
What do you miss most about him? Away from the baseball thing and even the father-son thing, was it something that you got from him that just for him being around that you miss on a daily basis?
He had a great ability, and I could always feed off of it when he was around, and I do now, even though he's physically not around. His spirit flows in and through me. He had a great ability to compose himself in really difficult situations. And he had a great peace about him. And he could command that peace where he could command a room of people wanting to kill each other and bring them together and try to find a compromise to where everybody could benefit from him. Now, Dad only spent...
Did he ever think about politics?
People tried to get him involved, and he said, I'll have nothing to do with it. He didn't want to have anything to do with politics. But he got involved in different things like church boards and school boards, and so there was a lot of politicking going on there. And he had the ability to get into a room where there were people that were at great odds with each other over issues that ranged everywhere from the actual type of education they were going to do to who was teaching and who were the personalities involved to the money it cost for tuition at a particular school. If there was a rise up against the headmaster or whatever, he had the ability to go into a room full of parents or other folks and get them to look at the whole picture, get them to calm down and say, okay, let's implement this. Here's our solution. And he had a calming effect on so many people that way because, hey, for whatever reason, he got that respect. He was very charismatic. And he wasn't flamboyant about it. He didn't have to yell, and he didn't have to, he brought everybody sort of together for the common good. It was very altruistic, and I don't know, that's something that I remember about him, and an ability that a thing that he had that I wish I had. I have a temper. I have a very low tolerance level, and I don't really do well sometimes with what I consider idiocy, and I have to speak up, and I end up blowing up. And I wish I had the ability to be calm and collected. The other thing that I miss with him probably as much is we used to sit and watch sports together on television. And we would banter back and forth about who was good and who wasn't. And, I was just recalling the other day when we were sitting at the house in Indian Wells down here years ago in the early 90s, or I can't remember, the rookie year or the second year that Adrián Beltré broke in with the Dodgers. And my dad, of course, was no longer involved in the game at all, but he loved to sit and watch baseball and sit there in his rocking chair and critique the organization and the players and the quality of baseball, etc. And he was really high on this guy Beltré, and I didn't see it. Well, here he's, at the end of his career, and he's a first vote Hall of Famer.
Do you think so? He could be. He's been very, very solid. So let me ask you something. Your dad was, after his career, he became a bullpen catcher and rose in the organization from bullpen catcher to bullpen coach. Didn't mean bullpen catcher. Bullpen coach to general manager. Who got behind him? How did he get, did he get to know Laurie? Was it a recommendation from somebody? How do you rise like that from bullpen coach to general manager?
I think it's a combination of good things, serendipity as well, being in the right place at the right time. Remember, when Dad went back to work for him, Horace was still owning the club, and he was strapped financially and going nowhere very fast, financially. And so the Major League Baseball had to take over the club, and they kind of
that's Spec Richardson that took
Spec Richardson, who came in to kind of oversee the day-to-day activities and be their general manager, et cetera, and try to save the club because they were in such dire straits financially.
I've heard bad things about Spec Richardson in terms of his relating to minorities. Can you?
Well, yeah, Spec was, an old school guy. He had those ignorances about him. Absolutely, he did. But, and that being said, he sort of tried to right the ship until Bud Herseth and Lurie were able to purchase the club. And then a year or two later, I think Lurie bought out Herseth's shares. And, for that time being, the Giants were saved from moving anywhere. And I don't know. I just think Dad's opportunities came and arose, one, because of his history with the club, the right time at the right place, I guess, if you will, in terms of when Lurie finally took up sole ownership of the club. He knew he had to make some changes. Initially, Dad was brought into the front office to be the director of player development in their minor league system, and he really is the architect of what the Giants are today in terms of their minor league system and the way it's structured and the way they place guys and the personnel that they bring on board to help teach these kids. And then when it was time for Spec to his services were no longer required by Bob Lurie or Major League Baseball, that's when Dad had the opportunity to go up to the front office and go into that general manager position. And so that kind of, he loved it. He really liked being the general manager. It was a challenge for him. My dad never turned down an opportunity that would be challenging or anything like that. But I think his true passion would have been able to manage and to, be on the field. but that opportunity never came about. And, in hindsight, I think Dad would have been very satisfied to have a chance at managing either the Giants or any other major league club. Because, I would also hear him say a couple of things. You take a job like that to get fired, and there aren't a whole lot of those jobs available, so I'll take what I can get, and that was, yeah. I mean, very rarely do you ever get a Walter Alston or a Tommy Lasorda. That's a testimony to the Dodgers in the O'Malley era, when they stuck with their general, they stuck with their leader.
They didn't do well under your dad. What?
No.
I mean, just let's face it.
They didn't.
What did he take satisfaction in? Was it that they improved? Noticing improvement of guys. What made him happy when things weren't going good?
My dad got a great thrill out of watching kids coming through their system and getting to the major leagues and having some success. He wasn't a huge, trader. He wasn't a guy that really get out there and get involved in transactions. He made some, and a couple of them were real doozies, i.e. the Jack Clark deal for David Green and an onslaught of other knuckleheads. The best player that came out of that was a guy named Jose Gonzalez, who later changed his name to Uribe, and he had a pretty decent career at shortstop. But, my dad got great satisfaction out of seeing kids come through their system and getting to the big leagues and doing well. But he was not the most intuitive when it came to acquiring players for other players. I will say this, though, and nobody can ever say that any other general manager has ever done this. In my opinion, he traded for 2 Hall of Fame broadcasters, and Mike Krukow and Duane Kuiper.
That's beautiful. And I think Kuiper played with Frank Robinson. Did he play under your dad?
Kuip played, yes. Dad actually traded for Duane Kuiper, and Frank was managing at that time. Frank was the manager. I'll share a story with you that just, recently occurred when I was up at Davenport's memorial a few weeks ago. And Kuip and I always, when we get to see each other, it's for me anyway, it's a joy. I mean, what an awesome, great guy, and we have
He's
such
He's a Saluki, like you
I know,
in Illinois.
Yeah, Southern Illinois, and exactly. But he grew up in Wisconsin. He went to play his college ball at Southern Illinois, and then he went on to sign and he went to the big leagues with the Cleveland Indians. And Dad made a deal, and the year before, Kuiper tore his knee up pretty bad. He got nailed turning the double play, and he tore up his left knee badly. It was a really horrific injury, and he was coming back, and he was doing just fine. And Duane told me just a couple weeks ago, he said, I remember the day I knew I loved your dad. He said, because he had actually called the doctor's office where Duane was getting his physical done to complete the deal. And my dad was actually speaking to the doctor. And Duane said to the doctor, I don't care what you say, no matter what it is, tell him I don't want to go. My knee's in horrible shape. I can't play. I failed the physical. And the doctor said verbatim the same thing to my dad, and he said my dad, and Duane heard him on the phone, on the receiver of the phone. He said, my dad said, good, I want him anyway.
Wow. Nice.
And so Kuip ended up coming over here, and he played a very light. Yes, he did. He really did. And I'll tell you.
Joe Morgan was there at that time, if I'm not mistaken.
There as well, yeah, exactly. And, that's about the time I was, early freshman, sophomore year in high school, and I was out there every day taking ground balls with Joe Morgan and Duane Kuiper. And I tell everybody, because it's the truth, that Duane Kuiper taught me how to play second base, and that's a pretty good tutelage. That's a pretty good tutor to have. That guy was a magician.
Yes, quick hands, very, very quick hands. And what's Morgan like?
Well, it's an unfortunate thing because my memories of Joe Morgan were great, and they still are. But over the years, more is revealed. And when you're young, like I was in high school, there was a level of naivety with me as well. But sort of during the Frank Robinson years, and Dad was working as the GM, there was a sports writer for the Examiner named Lowell Cohn, who was actually a movie critic there was an opening in the sports department, and they gave him the opportunity to be the Giants beat writer. And he came out one year with an article about my dad. He had made a couple of trades, and they, for whatever reason, because there was no validity to these statements, and there still isn't, but stated the headline of the article was all vanilla and no chocolate. So it was obviously a racial thing. And that, for whatever reason, took on a life of its own with Frank and Joe Morgan and Tom McGraw and some of the guys that worked with the club. And there was this air about the relationship aspect with Frank and Joe Morgan and Tom McGraw. And you know what? It was really unfair because both sides, my dad and Frank and Joe, didn't really understand. They took the media thing to heart as opposed to, because Dad had great respect for Frank. He really did. He did like him as a baseball man and as a manager, and he really thought Joe Morgan was extremely special, and who wouldn't? But those guys would kind of get together, and things kind of grew out of their own, and sort of blew up and later now, Joe came out with a book and he called my dad a racist, and that's okay because it's not true, and it's not really okay, but what can you do about it? But my memories of Joe Morgan are, man, what a brilliant ball player. I got, to hang out with him every day for a few years and watch his magic at second base, and that was what I aspired to be, was a second baseman.
Well,
and Joe,
just the way the man lied in his book. In other words, it wasn't true, means it was a lie. And you're not holding bitterness. You just go on to say, well, it's not true, but that's all right. And go on to say, which is true, that he was a terrific ball player, and you glossed it over. You got some class, Tim Haller.
Well, you know what? Let me just say this for the record. I love Joe Morgan. And I know that his interaction with me and his memories of me are good. I really believe that because he took to me like, chocolate chip to ice cream. He was so kind and giving and generous to me, and I was willing to suck in everything that he was able to transmit to me to try to be the best ball player I could be. And he was wonderful to me. And what I see in both sides of this problem with Dad and Frank and Joe was ignorance. And nothing more. I don't blame any one of them for it. I think even my father, to some degree, there was a little bit of ignorance because all he had to do was go into Frank's office and say, hey, let's talk about this. Let's get up past this bullshit because that's exactly what it is. We want to win. We have a good ball club. I trust you. I hope you trust me. Let's get beyond this because it's infantile. It's childish. It's immature, and it's ignorant. And neither one of them could do that. There was some pride there between both parties.
I don't understand this Lowell Cohn's remark about all chocolate, all vanilla and no chocolate.
All vanilla and no chocolate.
There, Frank Robinson's the manager.
Absolutely.
The batting coach. What are you talking about? How many black managers were in the major leagues before Frank Robinson?
Well, that's my point. That's absolutely my point in this whole thing is that it was absolute ignorance. And then just the side note to this whole story about the color of two men's skin, Lowell Cohn was in a lot of trouble because they published that story. And he was dead to rights, and so was the Examiner. Or the Chronicle. I can't remember what trash rag he wrote for. But, you know, they had a major suit hanging over their heads and cones. And Bob wanted to go and pursue it. And my dad said, you know what, we don't need this. We're bigger and better than to have this thing get so blown out of proportion. It's going to completely distract everything that we're trying to accomplish. And at the end of the day,
I'm blown away by if your dad makes the field manager a black man.
Yep.
And you bring in Joe Morgan, who was a proud black, both of those guys, proud black men.
As they should be.
As they should, of course. But my point is, if he was a racist, he would have brought in a weak black man who was a Tom, a yes sir kind of person. To have the balls to bring in two guys who were black with those personalities, and then to be criticized, I can't imagine where they came from.
I don't get it either, but
and how those guys could have taken offense to it, given that they were hired
by Dad and Bob Leary, by them together. It is, and that's how this whole thing is absolute ignorance, and it's embarrassing actually. And it's really funny because I still hold a little bit of a resentment towards Lowell Cohn, and he's working over in the East Bay. I think he's doing some freelance writing now. I'm not sure exactly what he's doing, but he's good friends with Marty Leary, and Marty and I are pretty good acquaintances. We're friends, I guess you would say.
Right.
And they were over in Oakland one day, and they were at an A's game. I think they were at an A's game or somewhere, and they were eating the ice cream. And somebody took a photograph and put it on Marty's Facebook page. And I texted, or I commented on the photo, and I said, "Hey, Lowell, is that vanilla or chocolate?"
Oh, what a nice needle, nice way to get them right in where it does shine. Nice. I like that.
Yeah, and that's just my own animosity. Those are my own, because he was the shit disturber in the whole thing, you know, and for no other reason other than to be a jerk, to do something so ignorant and so ill-informed and so non-journalistic.
Did Cohn and your dad have a thing before that? Did they have a riff?
Well, not at all, because Lowell had just really gotten that job. He was just new to the whole sports arena, you know, kind of writing. And
just been trying to make a bang, say, yellow journalism, that kind of stuff.
I truly believe that. That's probably what his intent was. The intent was to sort of shock journalism. Here I am, and you know, I'm going to make a statement, and I want to offend people, or I want to get some people to think how brilliant, because there are people that believe everything they read, you know, and there are people out there that are going to, everything they hear and read on television or in the newspaper has got to be the absolute truth. So if Lowell Cohn wrote it, oh man, Tom Haller's a racist. Oh my goodness. You know, and, you know, it just takes on a life of its own. So, but to this day, I still hold a little bit of a resentment towards Lowell Cohn because he painted a very dark picture of something that was the farthest thing from the truth. You know, and
well, you should. And like I say, you're still you're doing it with a calm voice. You're not screaming at the guy 25 years later. But I think that's about as low a piece of journalism as I can imagine. Just given that the field manager was black. Other than that, no black.
Well, then go back 15 or 20 years too, and his best friends even till the day he passed away were Willie McCovey, Willie Mays, Juan Marichal, Orlando Cepeda, and the list goes on. Adam Finitum, infinitely, his best friends were men of color. Okay. What does that tell you?
In this, yes, it tells me that this man is colorblind, and as was his best friend, Jimmy Davenport. So that absolutely tells you that Lowell Cohn was full of crap. But it also dispels an idea that I had in my head as a fan, an apologist for the Giants, because they moved, but I always loved them. I was always an apologist. There was always the rumor that the team in early 60s, mid 60s was cliquish, because they did have a very fair percentage of blacks, a very fair percentage of
and Latin players, and Latins,
absolutely, and and a lot of white guys too. So
sure.
And there were always rumors that there was, and you've dispelled those rumors for me countless times in just different conversations, different contexts. These guys got along; they loved each other. You wouldn't know that from the press. And I will say that the Northern California, San Francisco press, this is a very racist city, San Francisco. They're looking for things, and I wonder now, the information that I got, guys, the old writers, Stevens was a writer I remember early growing up listening to. Wonder how much of their stuff was slanted by their own bias and their own built-in racism.
Well, I think a lot of it was their own commentary and the way that they do how to present it. Here's something, because of that, growing up in that atmosphere, I don't like the media today at all. I personally do not care for the media. I don't even care if they're really upright, straight up people. I just don't really have a lot of respect for journalists. I just don't. I think that the majority of them are, where's what Ring Lardners of the past? Where are the guys from the old days that used to follow these clubs around on their train and become part of the team and the club and treat these fellows with dignity and respect, and was a fan? They were actual fans instead of criticizing about how they think they would be better if they were in the seat of general manager and president of a team. When they don't even have an inkling of qualification to do such. But they're certainly good at being negatively critical about something they know absolutely nothing about, because you know what? They never even played the game. And I ran into it when I was playing ball myself. They'd ask some of the stupidest questions, and I would just are you kidding me? And I know at the major league level, they were even worse. I know it because they've given privilege to go into a locker room, into a clubhouse, and given the backdoor treatment, and they take it for granted. They disrespect it. I have no regard for journalists. I don't like a lot of the TV people because it's, instead of doing the reporting, they're opining. It's their opinion. It isn't just state the facts and move on, but they have to put their 2 cents in. And I don't really think that's their job. But unfortunately, our culture has allowed that. You turn on CNN and you turn on Fox and you turn on every other cable news network, and it's people talking trash, and it's all about their own opinion. If you're not happy with it, then get out there and do something about it yourself.
Right.
But I think that from a sports journalistic point of view, I just don't have a lot of regard for today's sports writers. Now, there have been good ones, and there are some good ones out there today, but they're overshadowed by these trumpeters, and I just don't have a lot. And it's because of
let me segue on something you said to me. I get what you're saying. You mentioned Ring Lardner. Now, Ring Lardner, besides being a sports writer, was a terrific writer, a terrific author. And he wrote a lot of fiction. He wrote two books that stick out in my head. One was Alibi Ike, and the other was You Know Me, Al. And it was about these minor leaguers, or guys breaking into the major leagues and writing letters home, and he transcribed these, and it was just terrific.
Wasn't it great? No, I love this stuff.
Kid, did you read that? What did you read baseball literature when you were growing up?
Well, I'm reading Ring Lardner now. I am a member of the Library of America, and I just got a whole collection of his works. And I'm doing this Al thing, and
Alibi Ike, and You Know Me, Al.
Alibi Ike. Yeah, exactly. And it's phenomenal.
Human nature, it's phenomenal stuff. What else?
That was it. And then remember we talked about a few episodes back. We talked about the great hitters of Major League Baseball and that whole those collection of books. Yeah, I'm going over to my bookshelf again and pulling it out. It comes out of this Random House books. They have these different topics. The greatest World Series thrillers, secrets of big league play, great baseball pitchers, strange but true baseball stories, great catchers of the major leagues. The book that I have in my hand is Great Hitters of the Major Leagues. Those kind of things. Man, I would read that, and then I told you we talked quite at length about Baseball Digest and the one year, that edition every spring, the baseball, it wasn't the Baseball Encyclopedia, but it was that publication, a magazine they put out with all the clubs, all the minor leaguers. And that's the stuff I would read. I'd love, because it would be up to date. But some of this fiction, like Lardner wrote, it was brilliant, masterful literature. And the topic was baseball. How awesome is that?
The topic was baseball, but he transcended baseball by just human nature, like Alibi Ike. That could be the guy working at General Motors at the water cooler, that making an excuse for everything. Well, I turned in a report, they didn't like it. Well, it wasn't my fault. My assistant did this, and that's human nature. Great writing, great. Red Smith was another one from my youth that I remember. The words would flow. Leonard Coppett, Schechter. We're lucky to grow up in the era that I did, and cool.
Well, if you wanted any entertainment back then, you had to open up a book, because they sure as hell didn't have a cell phone.
No, they didn't have a cell phone, and they had games on. It was the game of the week. If you didn't have a major league team in where you were growing up, I had 3 at one time.
And it was in black and white.
It was in black and white. It was all your imagination, and it was the radio too. I loved the radio. And you mentioned growing up, you listened to Lon and Russ and what have you. Just magical moments on the radio, and then you'd get out there, you'd bring your transistor radio too. So you go out to the park, and you'd hold it up to your ear, and you'd listen to the game on the radio, and just walk down the street or sit on the beach and listen to the game. It's just a wonderful sport we're involved in, Timmy.
Yeah, we're so blessed to be able to have seen it evolve. Even though we may not like all of the things, the game itself is still pure. And that's what I love about baseball. because you still got to go out there. You got to throw it. You got to hit it. You got to run. You got to catch it. And it takes all that other distraction away from all the other crap that people want to throw into the game. These guys still have to do the deal. They got to catch it, throw it, run, hit, and that's what makes it so attractive, you know.
And there's every day there's some story that sticks out at you, some take on something. Today, for instance, I'm listening to the Mets play the Dodgers, and in the first or second inning, Utley comes up, and you know the history of Utley with the Mets and Dodgers. So Syndergaard throws behind him and becomes ejected. And they say, well, he should have had a warning, this, that, or the other thing. What does Utley do? Comes back, hits a home run. Then what does he do later in the game? And he's so hated in New York. I can't begin to tell you. He was the guy that barreled into Tejada last year in the playoffs. And I keep looking. I watched that play over and over again. He doesn't come close to touching second base. Could have with his hand, if he had a mind to, could have reached back and grabbed the base. He didn't. All he wanted to do was bowl over Tejada, breaks his leg. So how does he come back and handle this hatred in New York after he's thrown at? It was just 3 or 4 games now they've been talking. How are they going to get back at him? Throw behind him. Hangs in there, hits a home run, and then hits a granny later on to ice the game. It was, and I'm a Met fan. I just had to go, holy shit, this guy.
Yeah, you know, that's the thing about Chase Utley. I don't really appreciate Chase Utley a whole lot, but the one thing I do like about him,
come back today and hang in there with that's
pretty admirable. Yeah, it does tell you something. You know, I don't really care a whole lot for him, but to do stuff, and that's the way he plays the game, you have to admire that. You have to. And shame on Syndergaard for not planting one in his ribs, because that would never have been tolerated 30 years ago or 40 years ago. That guy, Utley, would have been on his...
Syndergaard did throw behind him. So
that doesn't count.
Even worse. I think throwing behind the guy can be very dangerous. First inclination is to lean back. I mean,
so why not just throw one right up under his right armpit and get on with it? You know, get it over with. That's all they've been waiting for. The same thing that happened with Toronto and the Texas Rangers. You know, they kind of pussyfoot around. And then something will blow up. And then the thing for what Utley did today, he's a gamer. The guy is a gamer.
Right.
No doubt about it.
In a stadium, like I say, 50,000 people booing your ass and literally hating you for probably the wrong reasons. I mean, hate, you got to save hate for the Hitlers of the world.
You got to respect the Chase Utley. You don't really hate him. You got to respect him. And that's something that the Mets fans, New York fans have a tendency to get a little bit overexcited. You know that, Ralph. You're a New York fan.
Oh,
but
I'm too old to be excited at this age.
But they hated him when he played for the Phillies, so it's just been going on. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time last year in that double play ball, so now that
he barreled. Go back and look at that thing on YouTube.
Oh yeah, it was awful.
He barreled into him. He missed.
And that's why I don't like him. I don't like him at all.
No.
He did that earlier this season, an opening series against the Padres, opening game, first game of the year. He came on the inside of the third baseline and deliberately tried to hurt the catcher on a play at the plate, boom play at the plate. And I don't like that. I don't like that. And if you're going to play that way, you better expect to get, there's going to be some retaliation. I don't appreciate that, especially now when rules have been changed and set to play in a manner that is a little bit more safe for these players. You follow the rules, and he's the one boob that has to act like that. So That's why I don't like Chase Utley, but man, he's a hell of a ball player. I respect his ability to play baseball. There's no doubt about it.
Night that he had tonight, begrudgingly respect the man, not liking him at all, but hey, that takes a lot of concentration. That takes a lot of something that I ain't got. So put it that way.
He's a talented baseball player, and when he's all done playing, his name will come up in conversation for the Hall of Fame. He's won a world championship. He's from a second baseman standpoint, he's collected an incredible statistical career for a second baseman. And you know what? At the end of the day,
he fielded for a long time.
Very good. And if he could have stayed healthy longer, I think his case would have been better. Because he hurt himself pretty badly over the course of a few years in Philadelphia, where he missed a lot of good years or time anyway. And but he's a winner, and he's a hard-nosed ball player. He's a little bit of a throwback, I would say, too. But in this day and age, with the salaries the way they are and the way the changes have made in the rules, he's playing a little dirty, I think. And people don't really like that.
He'll get his on the field. Players have a way of somehow evening it out. This just got a lot of publicity, and with all the publicity, to come back like that was one hell of a game. Speaking of hell of a games, you're a hell of a gamer, young man, and I'm delighted to have you be able to do this. We just chat. It's not, we just have a good time.
It's a coffee hour. It's a coffee hour. Let's talk a little baseball.
And nothing, I haven't enjoyed many things in a lifetime than just talking ball. And just,
I know.
It's great, Timmy. We'll catch you next week.
I appreciate you, Ralph. Thank you so much.
I can't wait to see you at the end of June, and I want you to just keep being healthy and keep doing what you're doing. You make a difference in the world. I know what you. We haven't talked much about this. Talk about what you do in the rehab thing and how much it affects you. You had a loss in your little family, and how that affected you last week.
Well, I work in the recovery field for alcohol and drug addiction, and that's a blessing. I'm a recovering alcoholic myself. So to be able to work with men that are early in their recovery is a blessing for me in my own recovery. But oftentimes, as many people know who are affected by this disease, either directly or indirectly as a loved one or a family member, the disease of drug addiction and alcoholism is like a tornado roaring through their family and their loved ones. And so it affects everybody. And it's just such a highly dramatic disease. And parallel to that whole thing is the mental illness side of it, because I'm a firm believer that when I was in my disease, I was pretty insane. I was self-absorbed, and so there was some imbalance there psychologically because I was living a life that was propelled by the use of alcohol. That all being said, a lot of the clients have other issues besides being just a drug addict or an alcoholic. Because the problem really is them. It isn't the substance. It's them and their ability or inability to cope with life in general and life on life's terms. And so the only way that they can escape from that is to use some sort of substance to try to calm the demons a little bit. And every so often, and it doesn't happen very much, and thank God it doesn't, and it happens too much already, is that we will lose one to suicide. And unfortunately, that's what happened just recently. That's why we missed the show last week. And that's just part of this disease, this horrific disease of addiction and alcoholism. And I've dedicated my life to working in this field and being a part of this thing because I'm affected by it myself.
Well, you're wonderful, and proud to have you as my friend.
I'm grateful, and I really appreciate your friendship, Ralph. I'm grateful that we can do this little podcast thing, and maybe a few people out there are going to be fortunate enough to be able to listen to it.
I want you to thank Gary Davenport, who was on with us the last time we had a show. He doesn't have a Facebook, or I don't know where he is on Facebook, or I would. I hope he had a good time, and I hope he enjoyed the evening, because he was terrific.
Well, he did, and I'll just let you know, on a couple of occasions since then, he's expressed his gratitude for getting an opportunity to be on the show, and he thought you were fabulous, and and Gary is a very fly below the radar kind of guy. He does not have a Facebook page. He's a chip off the old block. The apple didn't fall far from the tree when it comes to Jimmy Davenport and Gary Davenport. But Gary was very gracious.
Or Tom Haller and Timmy Haller.
Oh, well, I don't know about that. I'm a little bit of an asshole. My dad wasn't, but I appreciate the compliment.
Well, that was, remember who said those words? That was you.
Yes,
Are
it was.
we not all a little bit of an asshole, Timmy? What the hell is that?
Well, I sure hope so. I sure hope we are.
Hope so. And
that means we're trying.
Your dad, I'm sure your dad had his moments.
He certainly did with me as a kid, I'll tell you. But, I wasn't ever going to utter that word to him. I never would have said but I thought it a couple of times. I absolutely thought about it.
But no, I'm sure that wouldn't be the word. The second baseman would not be telling the catcher that. I'm just... that in itself is a great story about your dad's scouting ability, by the way.
Yeah. He had a knack for it. He could sniff out talent, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I got to meet, and I'm sure that your dad was responsible for bringing Jack Hyatt into the minor league system. I got to meet him when I was the Topps rep years ago in the 80s and 90s. And tell me something about Jack Hyatt and your dad, because they were teammates for a while and buds, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they were, and we were really close. The Hyatt, Jack, and the Howlers. We were pretty tight. Jack knew he was never going to be the star catcher for the Giants, so he really embraced the opportunity to work with Dad and learn from Dad, and they learned from each other. They worked together, and I was blessed to see Jack just recently at Jimmy Davenport's memorial, and boy, we shared a lot of great memories, and Jack really expressed his passion and love for my dad and what a great guy he was to him personally, and what an impact he made on his whole life, not just, from a baseball standpoint, but just the good old friendship kind of camaraderie that they shared. He said the one thing I loved about your dad more than anything was that even though he was the star catcher on the team, he treated everybody equally. He was a very humble man, and I loved your dad for that, and I that's such a compliment.
Jimmy, let me tell you something how it works in the Giants family. Your dad helped develop Jack Hyatt. Jack Hyatt helped develop Steve Decker when Decker was in the minors with the Giants, and now
absolutely he did.
Pardon me?
Yep. Yes, absolutely he did.
And now Decker is a minor league coach. So look at this. It goes back from 1961 when your dad came up to Decker being a minor league coach, who's going. You see the line. Who's going to affect a minor league player who will come up and help the Giants, who might turn into a coach someday, who will coach another guy. You see, the lineage
Oh yeah, and the generations that have touched each other, the generations.
Right, exactly.
There was never any of that. You know, the one thing that I never saw, and I still don't see it today, is this lording over where the veterans lord over the young guys. They embrace them. They bring them in. They don't act as if they're better than, or they have this innate, unexplainable attitude that we're all in this together. We're brothers. We're family. And the Giants have managed to maintain that culture from the days that they were in New York. You know, and it's just carried on, and it's gotten stronger, I think, over the years. It's just really, it's just really a refreshing thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't know where to say. I'm so happy that that I'm able to look back on being a Giant fan through that lineage and trace it back that way, and to know that my boyhood hero, the shortstop of the Giants, Alvin Dark, one of my boyhood heroes, had the effect on Tom Haller. So the first game I went to in 1951, Alvin Dark is playing shortstop, and I can trace the lineage of the effect that he had, that Tom has had, your dad has had on Jack Hyatt, all that. Really gives me goosebumps. It's really cool. It's nice, Timmy. Thanks for being able to identify it and include me in on it.
Well, thanks for giving me the forum to be able to share my life and my memories, because if it wasn't for this opportunity, Ralph, I would be sitting home watching the Warriors beat the Oklahoma Thunder. They're going back to they're heading back to Oakland. So thank God for that.
This got you away from basketball, because you
shame on you. Shame on you.
No, you watched the last 3 minutes and you got the game. That's
now we're at 14 minutes.
And let's pay homage. We can do that. It doesn't have to be baseball all the time. Let's pay homage to that great San Francisco Golden State Warrior team, and they will be back in San Francisco. And I can't help remember when they were the San Francisco Warriors with Nate Thurman and Rick Barry and
absolutely.
Yeah. So they're
absolutely. So, and then let's throw, and since we're doing this whole kudo thing, go San Jose Sharks. They could win the Stanley Cup this year.
They're going to the finals. I don't think they've ever been to the finals before.
No, they have not. So what an exciting time for Bay Area sports.
Nice. Timmy, we'll catch
I love you, Ralphie. Be good.
All right, my man. I can't wait for 3 weeks. You'll be up here, and we'll get to break bread.
Absolutely.
Be well, my
man.
Have
a great week.
Talk to you soon.
Hey,
Everybody out there, keep on keeping on. We'll see you next week. Adios.